Dory 1, this is Fireteam Delta. Dad's coming home.
Welcome to the Military Veteran Dad Podcast, where it is our mission to bring every dad home. I am your host, Ben Cloy. I'm a United States Marine veteran, husband, and a father. We will bring authentic conversations to inspire action in your life so we can close the gap between the dad you are today and the dad you want to be tomorrow. This is the Military Veteran Dad Podcast. Welcome back to another episode of Fatherhood Friday. I'm your host, Ben Cloy, and Fatherhood Fridays is where I drop on the mic to share my life, my wisdom, and whatever I feel that is on my heart that I think that my listeners need to hear out there. And based on some feedback that I received last week, and based on some meditation that I just did before hopping on, and the title of the meditation was called Coming Home, so I feel like there is a irony there when this podcast's mission is about bringing you home. So sometimes the universe opens a door and I feel like I need to walk through this. So in this particular case, I want to share a story. Now, this isn't a news story. This is a story that's been on my blog for quite some time. And because not everybody gets to my blog, something about this story hit me when I was meditating and I felt like I needed to share. I'm not sure who needs to hear this message out there, but this blog post, when I first wrote it in 2017, was a pivotal moment that allowed me to see the context of my life in a way that I had never seen it. And now the context of this blog is also a little bit interesting because it's not something or an exercise that many people do. So as the title of this episode is called, Are You Worth It? And now that's a hard title to write. Because I had to admit, when I wrote this blog post, Am I Worth It? It was hard to write. And if you listened to the Fatherhood Friday way back in the spring about Are You Still Sitting on the Bench, there is a lot within this blog post that originates in that story. So for a long, long time, way back in high school, I felt like I was always short of the finish line, that my best wasn't enough. I've said it many times in the podcast. I always felt like I was a trier and that trying never got me where I needed to go. And I remember one such time playing baseball my sophomore year. I had given my all during practice. I wasn't the best, but I always showed up and gave my all. That year, I only played 2 innings the entire season. We played 92 innings, and I only played 2 of them. And my primary job was keeping book that year. I share this because this feeling of not being worth or good enough has played out over my head like a broken record that just wouldn't stop. And I want to acknowledge something here before I continue, that feeling of a broken record, that it feels like it just continues, that's something that doesn't necessarily go away. Now, I wrote that when back in 2017, and there's days where I still feel that broken record playing. But as I've peeled back on this podcast many times, that's your ego trying to pull you back to where it feels comfortable. So continuing on, I was never the kid that was popular, good at sports, or good at making friends. I don't share this to collect pity. I share it so that I can take this opportunity to remind each of you that we are worth it and that life doesn't happen to us, it happens for us. And before I go into any further, again, I want you to give you some context. This story, this blog post, is actually the primary opening to any time I give a speech. I lead with the March of 2001, how many days it's been, and I lead into that this is my opening, earliest story that I can remember where my life was defined in a way that I didn't understand until just recently. So what transpires here is a letter that I wrote to myself in the context of a close friend who wanted to remind me of how much he appreciated our friendship. So imagine a close friend in your life. You haven't had conversations with in a long time, but he knows you intimately, and he sent you a letter one day reminding you why you're one of the best friends that he's had in his life. But keep in mind, this is myself writing myself a letter. Dear Ben, I'm not sure if it can be stated how much having you in my life has meant. I know when we talk, it has sounded like you're going through some tough times. But know that even when you doubt yourself or think that you're showing up is half the battle, and more than some friends do. Even when weeks go by or months without seeing each other, and when we've been together, it's just like we talked yesterday. We pick up right where we left off. I overheard you asking yourself the other day if you thought you were worth it. Hearing you ask that question was a hard thing to process. When I think of you as one of the worthiest individuals in my life who deserves to be happy. When you think about your effort compared to the result, you forget that effort is 98% of the journey. The destination is meaningless as long as you are growing along that journey. Your courage, openness, kindness, honesty, and most importantly, wisdom is what I admired most about you. Your example in my life has been the lighthouse that keeps me heading in the right direction. Even in a room full of darkness, you can be the light, the humor, and point the way all at the same time. You offer an example in my life to follow, and any man would be grateful to be able to call you a friend. I know growing up with you that you didn't always have the confidence of others or the mental strength, and you think that somehow that is holding you back. But your events weren't meant to stop you on your path. They were made to propel you. I know men who wish they had the adversity of your life to ground them and let them see the world through a different set of eyes. Even on my worst days, your kindness to reach out, help a friend, and not expect anything in return isn't something that happened because of your genetics. It was because you were there when no one reached out to you. In your past, people pulled you down so that later in life, you would be ready to lift people up. You always talk about your passion for leadership and your desire to master its principles. Your desire isn't by accident either. Leaders, by their nature, inspire action, purpose, and drive. You might not be a naturally born leader, but you are a leader forged in the fire of life. No one sees the potential in people as you do, and your ability to pick people up even when they might not be able to see it in themselves is something that I admire about you. You might not see it yet, but even your Marine Corps career was you rising to the challenge put in front of you. To rise from the ashes of the past, push through the moment, and discover the future your life is ready for you. You once told me you were afraid that no one would show up at your funeral and say nice things. This belief is rooted in your doubt and self-worth. It's my opinion the seeds of your life will be filled with fruit from the trees that people won't be able to say enough nice things. A friend told me a great quote the other day, that legacy is planting seeds in a garden you never get to see grow. Remember this when you doubt the results of your effort. Disconnect from the result and know finishing first is never as important as showing up and doing your best. I was playing a game with my 5-year-old daughter the other day, and it reminded me of a lesson that seems to fit what you might need to hear. She was upset that she wasn't winning, like most kids. I reminded her that the real winners are the ones who show up and give their best. On your darkest days, remember, the effort is what counts, not the result. I hope this letter has helped you refocus on your growth and ground yourself in the belief that your friendship is something worth more to me than all the money in the world. Lifetime champion, Ben. And guys, just to remind the context, I wrote that in 2017. I did not have a podcast. I had a blog. I had a feeling at that point. I didn't even have a vision. I only knew that I was tapping into something that I had not tapped in before. And I just want to remind you that this letter helped give my life purpose and redefine my path forward that gave way to this podcast, my dreams, and now even my professional speaking career. Because like I said, this blog post was the first time I recognized my sophomore year of baseball as something interesting. And then again, when I did the Fatherhood Friday on it this year, I dove into it even deeper about how I still was living my life on the bench because everybody else gets to have what they have in life, and I just get to sit on the bench. Your life has meaning, and you are worth it. Looking back, I would whisper one word to myself that I needed to hear back then. Believe. Believe I have everything I need to change my life. Believe that it's not one more book, one more podcast, or one more fill in the blank. It is one simple truth. I didn't believe I was capable of it. Believe you are capable of so much more as a man, a husband, and a father. And so I just want to remind you guys, that you are worth it. Every time I hear a dad reach out to me and is in the pit, I instantly reach my hand out because I was exactly in that pit. I walked through the door of my home and instantly always felt like a doormat. I felt useless. I felt incapable of leading myself and therefore incapable of leading any other person in my life, including my family, my kids. Didn't matter. I felt success at work, but a doormat at home. And guys, this primary message is to remind you. There was a moment in this letter, I don't know if you picked it up on it, but it was the most profound thing that I probably have ever said to myself. In your past, people pulled you down so that later in life, you'd be ready to lift people up. Everything that's happening in your life, good, the bad, and the ugly. I did an episode on that a few weeks ago about the good, the bad, and the ugly. Everything about that is preparing you for something that you may not see yet. Maybe it's just a feeling inside right now, but it's all there for a reason. And maybe you are right there in the furnace and fire of life. Maybe things with COVID has just cranked up the heat and you feel like the world is on fire around you and you are literally turning to ashes around it. I want to tell you that iron gets stronger within the furnace. You are the iron of your life. When you learn to strengthen through that process, you will learn that it's all creating something and revealing something within yourself that you couldn't really see. I remember doing these blogs. I was very consistent on it. I probably wrote one a week back for 2017. Each one of these blog posts revealed something about myself that I couldn't see yet until I put it on words. And I remember something very clearly back when I was writing these. I was the very first person that benefited from these blog posts because I would have 15,000 pieces of advice in my head. And when I wrote it, only one version would come out. And this is the crazy part. Every time I wrote it, it was always the version that my heart needed to hear. It wasn't all the stories in my head. What I wrote was exactly what my heart needed to feel. And that's a lesson that many dads don't embrace, that if we are struggling to feel what we need to feel, putting it in words can be a very good way for your heart to finally feel some of the things that it needs to feel in life. There is so much life out there waiting for you. I was recording an episode today with a Navy SEAL that'll be coming out in the next couple of weeks, and it reminded me of a moment that I got from watching NCIS through COVID most of this time. And there's a moment where he says, one man's story is another man's door. And in some cases, a story can be your own door. But the power of this podcast and the power of you finding a friend to share your story, you maybe think you're saving yourself, but in those moments, you could be potentially saving someone else that maybe just hasn't admitted it yet. So to wrap it up, I want to remind you guys, you are freaking worth it. You are an amazing dad if you let yourself feel what you need to feel, to acknowledge the unacknowledged, and that there is a life of freedom from emotion. Not that emotions won't ever go away, but they won't put you in a prison where you can't be yourself. If you really want to understand what you were put on this earth for, you need to acknowledge that you are worth it. I also saw something related tonight on love languages, and crazy enough, I never had put this introspection on it, that if you know your love languages, which is an entire separate podcast, so I won't go into it, but if you know love languages and you know the 5 love languages, and you know what your top love languages are, don't rely on other people to make sure that you feel love in those categories. Make sure you're feeding that yourself, because that's how you really feed the I am worth it in your head, when you learn how to love yourself. That is the journey that we talk so much about in this podcast, about loving yourself, so that when people show up in your life, like your kids and your wife, maybe at work, your coworkers, that everything you bring to them is just love. And it's not an expectation. It's not, I need something. It's not needy. That you are a fully capable human being, and you can show up in their life and be exactly who you need to be. So finally, one final reminder, you are fucking worth it. You are an amazing dad. And guys, it is time to come home. And with that, preview tease. Next week, I am going to drop one of the biggest Fatherhood Friday episodes that I've ever dropped, and it is going to be something that I've been working on for the last 3 months, and I can't wait to bring it to you guys. I think it's something that takes all the lessons from the Military Veteran Dad podcast and packages it up into exactly what dads need in their life. So stay tuned for our next Fatherhood Friday, where I reveal it's time to come home. Guys, have an amazing weekend, and I will talk to you guys again on Monday.